When you're a production company like ours, like 80% of what we do is branded content, right? So it's stuff that's funded by a brand. It's a lot of it is quite creative, and it's documentary driven, and we've done some stuff that have already been in film festivals. But tangential to that, companies like ours will raise their creative profile by doing independent projects. That'll be web series, short films. Right now, we're doing a big comedy project in Nashville. So other things that are not directly funded by brands or publishers. In this case, you make these and then publishers will say, oh, that's another arrow in their quiver. Maybe they'll get some creative accolades for it. We can enter into a number of film festivals. But that'll be point of that is now, okay, now we show we can do this. We show we can maybe win awards for it. Now we'll have a brand or a publisher or an online platform that will want to fund another one.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Well, team, I'm talking to Zack Slingsby today, and you might remember Zack from about 6 months ago. His episode first aired here at PYP, and he is one of the masterminds behind a company called Human Factor Media. And I invite you to go back and listen to that first conversation we had, because he shares his leadership journey. And today I wanted to bring Zack back because he recently created a short film called 26, the number 26. And when he sent out the announcement to his list, I was immediately intrigued because I'm, like I was saying before, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to storytelling and art of any form, whether it's film or dance or painting or poetry or novels, whatever it may be. I think the creative spirit is one of the greatest things we have as humans. And I wanted to have a conversation with you, Zack, about your creative process, creativity as a leadership skill, certainly. And I really wanted to dive into the story that you tell in this short film. And I will have a link to it in the show notes page, because I encourage you all to go watch it. It's about 20 minutes and it's really good. You're just captivated from the start. So why don't we begin kind of in the middle, and Zack, share with us, you wrote this. This is your script. What inspired you to write the story of 26? And tell us, instead of me reading what it's about, why don't you tell us about what it's about?
Sure. It's about a young guy in New York who, over the course of a few days, talks to friends and acquaintances and mentors about whether he should get married. He's engaged at 26, which historically would not be considered a young age to get married. But in New York, he gets a lot of different opinions on that. And, it's like you said, it's very short. It's pretty lighthearted. It's not intending to be, a heavy-handed piece of, art house cinema. It's more, it's this little window into these little characters and how they perceive this thing that is very common and yet somehow kind of alien in that exact moment in culture.
Okay. So it follows characters the main character is Tom, who's 26, engaged. He's engaged to Gina. And yes, the story takes us into these different little segments of him having conversations with a variety of people. And one of the things that really intrigued me from a storytelling standpoint was how you were able to address a variety of points of view through the characters. There were the three guys that are older than he is in the bar at the beginning, who each have a say about what marriage is and what it isn't. Then you have his father, who we never see. He's on the phone with him and has conversations about planning for the wedding. We see scenes of him with his fiance in their apartment. We see scenes of him talking with his bros, right? The bro culture, who are at various points in their own journeys. And I don't want to spoil it because it is so short, but one of the pieces that I thought was really, from a creative standpoint, that was so brilliant was you had one of those bros talking about how in World War II, men were men at 19. Men were going off to war to fight this, fascist, horrible thing that was going on back then. And they were married, they were married, and then they came home and they stayed with their wives. And I feel like one of the tensions that this film addresses is a tension that so many people feel today, which is we have so much more choice. In fact, the father character says at one point, the world is a very different place than when I got married. And Tom says, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, I don't know. I love that. I love that vague yet very telling answer. And so I would love for you to talk about how roles have shifted, this whole perception of what marriage is. I mean, you're married, you have a young family. Certainly you're in, we talked about this on our first conversation, the effects of immediate media on our lives, social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and such. What is the conversation that you pick up on, Zack, as a man in your 30s? You're beyond 26, but what is that tension that you're noticing for people?
That's a great question. Big question. I don't know if I'm suited for it, but I'll try. I agree with everything you just said, right? Like it's so when the dad character says, the world has changed so much since I was young. He says, what does that mean? He says, I don't know. He doesn't know what it means. And he doesn't know, he just knows that it is very different, but that generation is maybe necessarily out of touch with, how could they not be out of touch with how things are for someone in their 20s now? It seems like we still make a big deal of traditional moments. We still like a wedding season is huge, and we have so many social media sort of accoutrement around it. Mm-hmm. And it's this big thing. And then there's all these kind of plugins that are very modern that we do to make it, to enhance it. And we have a website page and a registry and a huge bachelor party that's kind of a culturally recent thing too. We just go crazy for like 3-4 days. So it's a really, there's all these rituals that are like so important to us. We're very protective of them. And I know a few people got married, and I was kind of like this, like you're just so protective over that year, all the events that happened that year. It's so important. So it's still very significant to us. It's a huge rite of passage, but at the same time, we trivialize a lot of it in the sense that we're willing to delay it for as long as we need to, till we feel 1,000% sure this is the exact moment to do it. And like you said, what is the impact of immediate media? I mean, that's an eternal commitment. It's really hard to make an eternal commitment. It's hard to make a commitment to anything now because there's so many. Why would I choose to be part of this club? Like I got to join this one club that's every Tuesday night. I have to meet there. That sounds too much. I have too much. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next Tuesday. There's so many commitments that are asked of us that are really hard to acquiesce to when there's so many other things that might take our attention. And I find that I do this, and I know a lot of other people do it, is you protect time to do nothing. You're always protecting your time to be alone and do nothing. You just don't want to I don't want to do anything that. Why? Well, because I have plans to literally sit there and maybe I'll watch Netflix, or maybe I'll be able to just, order whatever I want to eat and not have anybody bother me. And I think that, I don't know where that comes from. That's probably not totally new phenomenon, but it's, I just think that it's really hard for whatever reason. Everything's conspiring to make it really hard to take long-term commitments seriously and to want to have any urgency to begin them.
Okay. And you clearly wrestles with that. And so do his friends. One of his friends says at one point in the story, after they make the jokes, as we all tend to do, use humor as a deflection. He gets to something pretty tender. He says, listen, don't listen to these guys. They're getting old and fat and they're miserable. And there's that one friend who says every time he calls his brother, who's been married for a while, he's miserable. And so these perceptions around commitment that you were just discussing, I think is again, the nuances of how, as a storyteller, you handled these big philosophical, existential questions about commitment and certainly the roles of men and women, opportunities. I like that you just talked about these traditions that we cling to in American culture, and yet people are beginning to question them. Certainly, people in their 20s and younger are saying, no, we don't have to do it the way our parents or our grandparents did it. And yet, at the same time, there's that wistfulness in that one character, again, going back to looking at the World War II soldiers, of maybe they were onto something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be an evangelist for any position. I'm more make it to say, listen, this is this particular character, this particular guy, this particular journey. I don't necessarily have a widespread criticism of culture in mind, but you bring up that point, and it's true that we seem to have more at our fingertips than ever, and yet we seem to also have a restlessness and anxiety and unhappiness, a kind of this weird despair that's a few kind of just always at bay, but maybe sometimes not at bay. And it's just always right. It's always kind of around. So something is paradoxical in that we can be so free and so connected and so able to choose any type of outcome that we want, and yet have some kind of a weird sort of alien feeling of dread that we can't quite name.
And that's deep. And I wonder, do you think despair is an essential part of a good story? That some character has to represent that emotion? Because despair is a heavy emotion. It's basically you have no hope. When you're feeling despair, it's like you just don't see a way out.
Yeah. Well, something's going on. I mean, look at this is borne out in statistics that are surprising when you read them, but they're like, people are, the more you get to that experience of this wild, untrammeled, youthful kind of 20s. I don't know, what would you call it? I guess a type of like modern hedonism. You're very unhappy. It's such a wild time. It's so fun in so many ways. Like, fun is a word that is thrown around with, I think, is accurate. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, and you go out and it's crazy and it's fun. But then following that is always something that you don't understand. Yeah, I don't know if it's despair, but there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of people have talked a lot about mental health problems. I know more people. I don't know. I shouldn't probably be saying all this, but I know so many people in therapy that don't seem to have any reason to be in therapy. You look at them and you talk to them and you think, they're presenting a life that they're quite in control of, and that everything is, but there's some major disconnect that they can't quite get their hands on.
Yeah, I mean, I have children in their 20s, and I hear what they say, particularly my daughter, who is, I wouldn't say openly rebelling against tradition, but she is her own person, which I love. I raised her to be that, which brings me to a question about, there are three significant female characters in 26. You have Gina, the fiance of Tom. You have the beautiful, seductive blonde in the bar scene, which is a really powerful scene. And then you have the, 40-something divorcee,
right,
who's he meets with, and I never really caught what that relationship was. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, but it was just interesting because, again, you were addressing another point of view through each of those characters. Could you, again, talk about, from a creative standpoint, from a storyteller standpoint, what inspired you to have, Gina's an obvious one. She's the solid, she's sitting there reading like biblical passages to him.
She's reading Loving the Time of Cholera.
That's right.
Loving the Time of Cholera, Gabrielle Garcia Marquez. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And she's played by Morgan Carroll, who's such an awesome actress. And I should say Tom Reed Rosenberg is another great actor. And then Catherine Castello was at the bar, the outdoor beer garden scene where she kind of goes into that supposition about what it would be like if he was just a single guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joanne Roberts in the restaurant, she's supposed to be his professor, or just a sort of a figure of authority. I think at the beginning she's looking at his paper that he wrote, or a professor or a job mentor or something like that. Yeah. Well, what is the reason for the? I mean, those are just the kinds of. They're all people that you would meet in New York. It's just, I don't know, And I live now in Nashville, and you meet people that are not too dissimilar, but there's a New York type of, and that's where you are, and that's where you live, and I believe that's where you grew up, and it's just there's just a character that is still so unique to that zip code that is just they come in different forms and different ages, and they have certain affectations, and we wanted to really capture what that would be like if this guy who's young and maybe even a transplant and kind of was going through this, but had become, like a lot of people do, sucked up into that world, and then you start to talk to the people in your life. What would they really say? What would they really think? And how would their experiences color that in? And they all just did such a good job of selling that.
Oh, they did. The acting was wonderful. It was so natural. It really felt, you just, as a viewer, just brought into the story, and you feel like you do know these people, that you've heard them, you've seen them, even if they do have that New York vibe. There is a universality to the story, which obviously a good story will have. So there's something that you do in this movie that many artists do, and that is you make an appearance. You are a character in your own film, and your daughter
cast myself.
That's right.
Yeah, it's my daughter. Yes.
Talk to listeners about, as a creative, that decision to include yourself in something that you create. I think that's an interesting decision.
Yeah. Well, in this case, yes, that's true. And I thought, I was looking for what lines could I do. Like when I write it, I feel a little more confident, and I've done it with something that we did recently, but I'm not necessarily inherently an actor. And I in that case, we shot this over 3 days in New York.
Wow.
Trying to squeeze between other projects, and COVID times, you'll probably, if you're looking closely, you'll catch some outdoor masks, and it's a very, it was just all very run and gun. So me doing it, sometimes it's like, all right, this actor's available at this time. We got to shoot this scene in 2 hours so we can go over to this park and do that scene. So it was just very helpful to have just practically speaking an actor on hand to do that, which I was. But but yeah, I'm that guy. I'm the married guy with kids, so I thought I could deliver some of those with some of that texture. Yeah.
Again, from a story standpoint, your role representing someone who made the decision, now has kids, and again, for those of you who go and watch this, that scene is another real pivotal scene in Tom's journey of thinking through what he's about to do, if this is the right decision. Again, the whole, the power of storytelling. I mean, this is what you're immersed in every day, Zach. This is what your Human Factor Media sells to companies to, I'm going to move away from talking specifically about your film and more into something that I'm curious what your viewpoint is on it. And that is the sudden, it feels like it's sudden, even though it's not, but the sudden rise of artificial intelligence in how people are showing up to writing, particularly also to art. You've got apps like Lensa AI. I don't know. I'm not in your world of filmmaking. I don't know if there's, probably they are. They're working on a way to artificially, take parts of existing things and mash them up and say, here's a movie, right?
Yeah.
What do you see as the pluses and minuses of artificial intelligence in the creative space for all of us who earn our livings creating conversations like this, movies like 26, the commercials and things that you do for different brands? Where are you at on this?
Oh man. When are we going to get to the hard questions? No,
I don't throw softballs.
Yeah, listen, I don't know. I'm only a little bit familiar. What's funny, when they remember The Irishman, a Scorsese movie a few years ago, or maybe it was, I don't know, it was probably a while ago now, 5-6 years ago.
Yes.
They artificially age them younger, right? Using technology. And then remember there was a story that in one scene, they didn't have the right line. So they just played with the composites of their voices. And I think one of the actors said, next time around, we don't even need to be here. And
Interesting. I didn't know that about
kind
that.
of previewing what that could look like. Yeah, it's a threat to, I'm just not well read enough on Chat GPT in particular and all the iterations that are coming. What seems to be pretty scary is that this is 1.0. Think about, everything 1.0 that we know about and how analog it is compared to the version that we have now. So I do think that's scary, least of all for its creative implications, probably way more so for all the other implications on things like, I don't know, autonomous human life, but
war. I heard something about.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, war.
So, but I guess when you get down the list of creativity, which again, yeah, you're right. It's our craft and it's what's most important to us. And yeah, I think it's important to a lot of other people. I don't know what they can do. I know that all of creativity. The problem with all of creativity is it's got to find a home in the marketplace, and it's got to find an audience that's receptive to what they're putting out. Now, it seems like on YouTube, ChatGPT could probably start to engineer videos that are going to hack the algorithm and find out the right create the proper thumbnail and the right text. And so in digital culture, and like you said, for content creation online, it could probably be pretty compelling. Can it make a movie that has the same arresting experience on its audience that The Godfather or Casablanca or Gone with the Wind has on an audience? I don't know. I really don't know the answer. I think that first we have to be able to show that audiences are going to be fine, even if they can't distinguish it. Isn't there some part of us that wants to see other human beings having a role? Is there an X factor that human creativity brings that no amount of automation can solve for? I'm still betting yes, but I'm starting to hedge that more the more I see what comes out. So I don't know, but I would like to go on the record as, yeah, I think that there's something in the mode of digging for creative truth, for literary truth, as we talked about. I think last time we talked about why is the essence of literary truth? Why is it different than other kinds of truth? And why is that's conveyed through storytelling so unique? I mean, when you talk about what the more, like, just to say about the film, the short film, a lot of people brought way different explanations to that ending. Depending on a lot of people I found plugged in their own life experience for what the ending meant. And so that's something that I think you wouldn't be able to do. That ineffability of creative storytelling is a really, really nuanced human trait. It's not something that I think that, you were going to have these arguments about things and we're going to get to a certain level of what a character is doing or feeling. I don't know. It's not clear that ChatGPT can ever really touch that point. But I think it ties into a bigger, well, I don't know if you have thoughts about that, and then I have a second point, but I'll pause there if you have any feedback to that.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
I'm listening to you thinking, I agree. And it may be in terms of, I think at the end of the day, we humans are still programmed to respond to the nuances of other human experiences. And as sophisticated as artificial intelligence is becoming, the little that I've played around in Chat GPT has revealed to me that it is almost like magic. And at the same time, it's very disappointing because it's flat.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, when I was teaching high school English, and one of the assignments every year was the 5-paragraph essay. And many listeners and you yourself may remember that was always a staple of an English classroom is we're going to learn how to write the 5-paragraph essay. It might be a narrative essay. It might be cause and effect. It might be persuasive, but you start with the intro, you have your thesis, 3 supporting paragraphs to show why this matters, and then conclude, right?
Right.
So I feel like a lot of the content that has been created back to me when I use that tool can spark an idea like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I'm not just going to copy and paste what came back to me and say, here it is. And that I've had conversations recently with people who are in marketing, for example, who are copywriters, and they're talking about these things that the emotion is missing, and that's what we respond to. And that's again why I think your short film is as powerful as it is, because in its simplicity, it is so deeply emotional. And yes, each viewer is going to bring his or her life experience to the different characters. They're going to resonate more with one than another. And look at how, you left, I'm not going to spoil the end, but the end is open. It's really open to interpretation, right? Which is, to me, a really, that's a good mark of that's a mark of a really good story, is it isn't neatly tied up with a bow. And it feels to me like artificial intelligence is, well, here it is and it's finite. Here's your content. You asked me this and here I'm giving it to you. Right. And don't argue with me.
Right? Yeah. It's looking for an example to cite, but I think that, so it can like, what's really weird is you say like, write me a story about a poorhouse in the style of Charles Dickens, and it's pretty good, right? So, that's the big variable. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, think about what a novel does. They throw you into a situation, and then from that situation, the characters react with the same flair that a real person would react to that situation. And then from there, you're going into another interior level and another interior level, another interior level. So you're breaking down a plot into the characters that form it, and then from there into the interior worlds that comprise those characters. It's a really hard thing to do. Let me give you 2 examples: one fiction, one nonfiction. One, Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. So it's an incredible plot, and yeah, you could say I would bet that ChatGPT could probably come up with some convoluted plotting, but I would wonder if they could do with it what Dostoevsky did, which is you're tying this crazy sequence of events where he's convinced himself that he has to go and kill this woman. Okay, now why is that? That's interesting. That's relevant to the cops. That's relevant to the people in the hallway who now sneak up and he's having to hide from them. And that's relevant to this girl that he loves and to his academic career. Okay, that's a lot of threads to connect. What about how is it relevant to his idea of human power and overcoming basically the mandates of God? He's deciding that you can be so powerful that you can overcome moral law, and that once you do that, you are basically a god. And then he has to. Okay, so now he's killed the woman. Now he's on the run. Now he's confronted by this cop who's playing these mind games with him. And every part of that conversation that he's being interrogated with is tying up to his philosophy. And every part of that philosophy is tied to his fear that he's going to get caught, tied to the romance that he has with this girl. It's insane. It's an insane level of storytelling that is not at all clear to me that, you would have to have such a grasp of the things that we don't talk about, of the secrets of the soul that we do not discuss, in order to write something like that.
Yes.
Second thing I would say is I just read a book by David Milch, the writer behind Deadwood and NYPD Blue and a lot of really good shows. And he has Alzheimer's disease. And he's writing this book. He's writing this book about his career and his life in the throes of Alzheimer's. So he's losing his mind, and he's writing all about his life and the lessons that came from it. And he had a crazy, layered, tragic life. He was a gambling addict and a drug addict, and he had stories about financial hardship and ruin and family life, all told through this unbelievably unique lens. It's a way that I've never heard any story told. So I don't for a minute think that as arresting as and moving as that account was, could be recreated by, a website.
Yeah, by machine learning. Yes, the secrets of the soul, the belief system that drives people to behave the way they do in different situations, what leads us to perhaps an impulsive moment that then changes the course of our lives forever, like, right. In Crime and Punishment, murdering somebody. I agree. I'm just curious because it's so new, and it is, people are talking about it all the time, and the kind of work that you do is grounded in what you just described about the nuances, the complexities of being a human being. And I think a big question that we need to ask ourselves in light of artificial intelligence is, why is it becoming, what is behind it? I don't want to sound like a broken record because I've talked about this before, but follow the money, right? What somebody's profiting from this kind of technology, and it almost feels like another crazy making element. Like more, it's like we don't have enough content. We need even more content. So let's make it easier to create content, and then it just becomes this regurgitation of. And a lot of stuff that's inaccurate. I mean, I've tested it. I've done things like write a bio for, and then I'll put my name, Mary Lou Kayser, for like a conference. This stuff that I'm watching it, you watch it compose in front of your eyes, and it has me having an MBA from the University of Kansas. Right. I mean, it's just, and so people who aren't sophisticated or have enough worldview to understand this is not accurate could get into a lot of hot water. So that's another piece. And then I guess the other thing that comes up right now is the whole plagiarism thing. I mean, you've been creating content online for a while. I've created a lot of written content. I'm thinking that's in those feelers, whatever they are searching everything that's on the internet and pulling stuff. You know?
It purport to create everything in an original way. I don't know if there are enough permutations. I don't know either. Here's another thing I would say that we kind of got to, but I think, so I'm optimistic about your question, but I'm pessimistic about something much greater, which is like, we're talking about the tech side, right? Let's talk about the market side. The market side is in, I think, much more perilous circumstance. Like, people are saying, do you really think the book is in danger? I think the movie is in danger. I think the books are so far gone that I think I think we will literally get to a point where we have a hard time. A lot of us are already there. A lot of people are already there where they have a hard time sitting down watching a 2-hour movie. It's a really weird thing. The experience of long form content has changed in a really weird and seemingly permanent way. We used to have a room in the house where we all got together to watch something. Content experiences now are so fragmented. You're watching something either on a phone in short increments, on a tablet, on your computer, and people are watching stuff all times of the day. They're watching it. They're catching 10 minutes before work. They're watching a half hour on their lunch break. They're watching stuff on the way to their commute, and they'll go to the bathroom. They'll go to talk to somebody, put on a 2-minute clip. It's such a far cry from it used to be. The content experience used to be communal. Now it's very individualized. It used to be we're watching it at night in the living room with the family. That was where you were watching your stuff. It was one room, one place, one device. Now it's every place, all kinds of different devices, and usually alone. And so that's a really weird change because it really is biased towards short form content. And now you're competing, when you're making a movie, you're competing not just with other movies, you're competing mostly with people who want to spend their time catching up on all the voyeuristic pleasures of the internet. And there's so many of them. Everybody you follow has an update that day, usually via video.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, vlogs and updated podcast clips and everything. And I'm guilty of it too. So I understand, like,
I'm contributing.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not even judging it. It's just a reality. It's a reality. It's just that, I don't know, when you put a movie or a show out now, I don't even know the best way to distribute it. Like, people are struggling. I know great creators of TV shows and movies that they don't know what happened. They made something and some streamer was like, yeah, we got it. We're going to market it. We're going to put up poster. We're going to do all the things we've ever done to get the word out. And no, it's a nothing happens. It's a little flame in the wind, and it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe they'll get some residuals, people searching for something deep to watch on Hulu or something, but they're not, it's a plethora of content and a lack of interest in long form stuff.
Man, yeah. I don't know if you caught this, but Adam Sandler just won the Mark Twain Prize for humor for American
I saw it
humor.
on my YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. At the Kennedy Center, he was just acknowledged. And I watched it the other night, and I've been an Adam Sandler fan since he was on SNL, right? I mean, many of us have been. And what struck me, there were a lot of things that struck me about that, but it ties into what you just said, is here's a man who has a tremendous body of work, whose creative output has yielded $4 billion, not to him per se, but has generated that kind of an economy. That's no small feat. And he talked about, was it he, or it might have been one of his friends that spoke, but somebody said they were reminiscing about growing up and I think it was Adam Sandler, how his older brother, he would watch Benny Hill together. He would watch Monty Python. He would watch, they all wanted to be Eddie Murphy, right? Like Eddie Murphy set the bar. And that community that you're talking about, I think that's such an important point to emphasize, that we are fragmented. We are consuming content alone at all hours of the day. And it makes it difficult. I have noticed in my own personal life, I'll be with people, say at a dinner or whatever kind of, and, they'll start quoting a movie line, or they'll start referencing a show. In fact, people are aghast when I say, I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I did not watch I'm one of probably 2 people that wasn't hashtag GOT, right?
Right.
I was busy raising my kids.
Right.
Time, right?
Right.
But I did watch The Wire.
Yep.
Loved that. And I was so sad to see that one, I'm terrible remembering names, but that one actor just died who was in that. So Langley something, was it?
No, it was.
God, he was so good in that.
Yeah, it was. Lance.
Lance.
Reddick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just feels like, we're in this, you're getting at, we're in this, maybe on the back nine of this shift where consumption of content has fundamentally changed, and there isn't the community. I mean, I can't remember the last time I went to see a movie in a theater, partly because of COVID, when everything got shut down. But now theaters are open, and movies are being advertised. I watch March Madness, and so a lot of movies are being advertised, coming attractions, and I'm seeing some really, I'm like, oh, I want to see the new Matt Damon movie, about Nike and Air Jordan stuff. That looks good, and a couple of others. But I will admit to something you said, Zach. I have a hard time sitting and watching a full-length movie because I have fallen into fragment, or I'll pause it right in the middle. I won't even, it's not like being in a theater where even if you have to go to the bathroom, like, I'm not leaving, I'm going to, when I was younger. So God, so where are we going with this? Like, what is there an answer?
That's what's scary, is the force multiplier. It's not even where we are right now. It's what's going to happen. And I don't know how it gets better. But that's why we talk about ChatGPT. It's like, that's not good, but they're only going to be as successful as the market says that they're putting out valuable content. And right now, it's looking like we're waving them in, And it's really weird, because we obviously like to feel something that rocks our world a little bit, and you throws your perspective up. You leave, there's some of the best experiences you've had in a movie theater. I'm sure you leave the movie and you're like, oh my goodness, that was something that I couldn't understand could happen. And now I think differently for, I don't know, at least the next 2 weeks or something. It has some profound impact on you, right? And it's like that is such a great experience, but it's harder to search that out because it requires an attention and it requires a vulnerability that we don't always want to exhibit. And I don't know, there's something that I think we're pushing against when we're welcoming in all these quick hits. Like I watch a 4-minute clip on YouTube of like what happened in the Barstool Sports podcasting feud this week, and it doesn't demand anything of me at all. And I laugh a little bit, and I get a little, make a note about, okay, that's where media is, and that's what's permissible on YouTube now, and that's what's going on. And it's just like it's different than we watched Braveheart recently. My wife and I watched Braveheart, and it's night and day. I mean, you don't know that those parts of you are wanting to be woken up, and then when they are, you're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. This is not anything in the league of a digital content experience. And and here's a weird thing, right? Like the younger people who are, let's say they're in their teens right now or in their 20s right now, they only know TikTok. And what the TikTok rule is, what are you going to do in the first 3 seconds to stop somebody from moving past your video? So you have 3 seconds. Now, if I said to you, we're having a conversation, I said, you have 3 seconds to get my attention. You would probably try to make a joke or say something interesting or whatever, but it wouldn't work. There's not enough time. So eventually we'd be relegated to just making a loud noise or making a funny face.
I was just thinking, boom.
Yeah, just do something crazy. Like, wow, I got to get her attention before she turns away and talks to someone else. I would probably just start making noises or weird faces. And that's kind of where content is devolving to. We're just trying to do something quick. Anyway, look, I don't want to become, all doomsday. I think, like you said at the beginning,
you're not.
Yeah, there's other good things, and it's not. I have a career off the fact that there are so many digital purveyors of content that want to hire creatives to do work, and a lot of other people have careers off that. So, you got to take it for. I'm always looking forward, and I'm always trying to find a new way to exercise creativity in the market. But it's there's definitely causes for apprehension.
Well, yeah, and not to belittle content creators, I think there's a role, and you do what you do so well, and it resonates because there is an audience who wants more than a 3-second startle or hit. And in all fairness, I see my children are in their 20s, and when I'm around them and I witness there's a backlash to, people who are walking away from the whole digital scene because they want something deeper. They want to be moved. They want to be engrossed in a story like Braveheart. I just watched last week a film I used to teach called Beckett. It was made in 1964 with Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole. And you want to talk about, first of all, they don't make movies like that anymore. They haven't. They weren't even making movies like that in the 80s, right? But the story, it was based on a play originally. With playwriting, as you know, script writing, that's where good storytelling begins. It isn't about all these special effects, which is what we see a lot of today. But at the same time, there does have to be an audience awareness, right? When you are in a commercial facing kind of thing, is what is going to get attention, what is going to resonate. And I want to, as we wind this down today, Zach, it's first of all, again, thank you for wanting to go deep with me philosophically, and also address some big questions that I think are pivotal to anybody who is in business today. I don't care if you're running, a manufacturing company or your mom and pop store that sells bagels. I mean, we are all in this big soup of a shift, and people are grasping something to hold on to. And again, that's why I think your movie or your short film was so compelling to me, because it's like, this is different. This is not an Instagram reel. This is not a TikTok video. This is a story about a big life decision that most people are going to face at one time or another. Am I going to go through life partnered, or am I going to go through life bouncing around, or am I going to go through life alone? And, scrolling Instagram isn't going to fill that hole, right? Again, I learned things on Instagram, believe it or not, but I think where we need to head is, let's see these as tools for growth, for empowering people, for getting a message out that allows us to be fully human, right? And again, in your company's name, it's Human Factor Media. It's like, folks, let's not forget, at the end of the day, we are of this world, right? So, I'm a fan, and I'm grateful that you and your team are committed to keeping the purity of human storytelling alive, that you're willing to take some risks and be vulnerable. I really do think that as technology becomes more of what it looks like it's becoming, it's the law of polarity. There's going to be this whole other thing saying, wait a minute, sure. I just want to sit around a campfire with my friends and, BS about how wonderful it is to sit under the stars and smell the smoke, and that we are together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that that's a pastime that needs defending. It's so true, though. It's so true. Yeah. I think that the more we can use things to turn us back toward real life. You watch something, you want to go back and share it, or you want to go, you have a social experience around it. Or you're just reminded that, it's probably a good thing to go out and try to find someone to share life with. I think all those are just great uses of technology. And then we know, obviously, if you very eloquently summarized all the ways that it's not so, can become more of a trap than a helpmate. But listen, thanks for everything you said. It was so nice and so flattering, and to have that affirmation from someone who's got such great taste and so articulate and wise. I really appreciate it.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes, but leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.